Hello, this is Fleur Majestrix, and this will be a discussion on nuclear Pokemon. Nuclear Pokemon come in two varieties. There are unstable nuclear Pokemon, and then there are the pure nuclear Pokemon, pure in air quotes. Unstable nuclear Pokemon are the Pokemon you can catch throughout the game of Uranium that have been corrupted, in air quotes, by this radiation. I say corrupted because what nuclear Pokemon are kind of are just like an homage to Shadow Pokemon, but I'll discuss that a little bit more when I discuss what they do for the plot of the game. So Unstables will use the same base stats and level up tree as the Pokemon they were based around. So example, we fought a nuclear Tankoon. It will use Tankoon's exact base stats and it will use its level up tree with the difference of some unstable nuclear Pokemon will just have nuclear moves on top of them. And those are generally static nuclear moves that you can delete, but you're not going to learn any new ones for those. Only pure nuclear Pokemon are going to learn nuclear moves as they level up. And that kind of then goes on to exactly just kind of pure nuclears. Example of a pure nuclear is the one you're staring at right now, Nucleon, and there are other ones like the quote unquote box legendary that is a pure nuclear. Pardon me. Pure nuclears they're not corrupted, basically. They will listen to you, and I'm gonna talk about that right after I explain pures. Pures will also learn nuclear moves as they level up. They have their own base stats. They're their own Pokemon, in short. So I mentioned that pures will listen to you. Unstable nuclear Pokemon, much like pures, can be caught. And the unstable nuclear Pokemon have a little something extra on top of them. They will not obey you. They will have a chance to do basically they'll do another move that you didn't tell them to do. They may just ignore your orders completely, or if you're lucky, they may do the move you asked of them. They don't listen. This is explained in the plot why, but I'll get into that when I talk about the plot behind these. So that's kind of just the main difference. Unstables really aren't going to be worth your time to catch because they won't listen to you. You can fix that. It's just you won't be able to fix that until later on in the game. And it's a little too late for you to fix that. That's why I definitely recommend don't catch any. Like you can catch the unstables just if you want to, but I wouldn't recommend using them because you can catch like a nuclear Gyarados, and you can catch one, and it all intents and purposes would be pretty good if it would listen to you, and if you could fix that at least decently early on, but you can't. So how does nuclear work as a typing, though? That seems like an interesting thing to discuss. And nuclear as a typing is a really unbalanced typing. It is super affected by everything. So everything in the game except itself will hit a nuclear Pokemon for super effective damage. Yes, that includes normal type moves, which normally can't hit anything for super effective. I don't know why Uranium did at least that. I guess they either wanted to really try to balance it, which to me they still failed at, or they just wanted to do it because being different is cool. I imagine it's mostly the former, though. The trade-off, though, for that is that nuclear type moves will deal super effective damage to every typing except for steel and nuclear. What this does is it makes nuclear a glass cannon typing. It is basically forever stuck in the role of glass cannon because you can catch pure nuclears that can be tanks, but they're worthless because nuclear is only as effective as how fast they can move before you and how much pain can they inflict, which there is a big difference between nuclear and shadow moves. Their example is it basically sounds like a lot like a shadow Pokemon. Shadow moves will hit any Pokemon that's not a shadow Pokemon for super effective damage, but shadow moves will only hit for ×2. Nuclear, since it is a true blue typing, at least in Uranium, will get the same benefits. That includes if you are any two typings that don't include steel or nuclear, so like fire ground, water electric, or like, you know, ground dragon, doesn't matter. You're taking ×4 super effective damage, which again makes the aspect of tanky nuclears not fully worth it. There are the tanky nuclears generally are mononuclear, but you're still taking ×2 from almost everything in the game. So that you kind of fail at your job as a tank when you're really not going to be able to tank much, at least not without a lot of setup. So that's kind of a big issue I have with nuclear. Is that the other issue I have with it mechanically is how reliant on speed it is. Speed to me has always been one of the best stats in Pokemon. Tanks can still do a lot. They're very powerful. The ability to stall is powerful. Some teams are really good at it. Not saying it isn't, but speed is so important in the game, in my opinion. The ability to act before your opponent is usually one of the most coveted things in any form of game, especially a competitive game such as Pokemon or even a competitive card game like Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just the ability to act first is super important. Even in something like chess, where it's super balanced on both sides, from what I have seen, that there are studies showing that the players who go first still sometimes win a bit more because just the ability to act first means so much in a lot of games. It's super important. And it's no different from nuclear. They really need to act first. If they don't, they're most likely going to die. Because even the ones that are like mononuclear are still taking ×2 from everything, and they're still fairly squishy. Nucleon is mononuclear, and it's a very squishy Pokemon. But the ones that are like dual type nuclear, the unstables, they can be hit with ×4 rather easily as long as you understand what their first typing is. You can basically hit them for ×4 very consistently, because nuclear is just weak to everything but itself. This also brings a problem in terms of main game balance too. Not so much on having a difficult time in the beginning, but more so for like 2 fights in this game where fighting a speedy nuclear type is actually just hell, because it's almost always going to hit you for ×4. And this is also why Garurul is a very important Pokemon, because it's the only pure steel typing in Uranium. So it's the only Pokemon in Uranium that can actually resist nuclear that's not a nuclear typing itself. And by that I mean a pure nuclear that's mononuclear, because again, if you're unstable, you have another typing, and that means you'll just take a neutral damage. The same goes for many of the other steel typings, because they're all dual typed. And dual typings are very common in Uranium. So this makes 2 specific fights with nuclears rather annoying, and those 2 fights are annoying anyway, even if you have Garurul, primarily because of the moveset this nuclear Pokemon you're going to fight has. I'll get more into that when we get to that fight. That's really it for the mechanics of nuclear, and my big issues are primarily balancing. There are 2 main nuclear Pokemon that are very unbalancing, because they actually are able to get the speed and power behind their nuclear moves to basically one-shot pretty much everything in the game. And that is kind of one of nuclear's other weaknesses, is that the nuclear moves themselves generally have low base powers. But again, when you're hitting for ×4 as consistently as you will be in Uranium, it's not that big of a weakness. But it is still something to take note of. There are a few nuclear moves that are going to hit very hard, and those are the problem moves, for good reason. And that's those are just my big issues. I really don't like Pokemon that just rely only on speed. It's fine for some cases, but it's very hard to balance, because if you can't outspeed them, or you don't have priority, you basically can lose right off the bat from that alone. And this is a problem because the 2 really good nuclear Pokemon in the game can be used online in the online competitive services for Uranium. I know one of them definitely can. I don't know if the second one fully can. Maybe it can, maybe it can't. But I definitely know the big problem one can be. Beyond that, also, I had the issue of them not obeying you. That makes catching the unstable ones, again, borderline pointless, because they're going to be weak to almost everything. And because they're not listening to you, you won't be able to make use of that new mechanic that they have. But Uranium, I guess, wanted to do that to balance it out while also applying a plot reason to it. But it doesn't really balance it out. It just makes, again, using it pointless. Especially because you won't be able to purify them again until later, which is the big problem. The one you're staring at now can be obtained, is technically the earliest one you can get in terms of using one consistently, and you won't get this one till 6th gym. But the one, Nucleon, the one you're staring at now, is probably the best, one of the best ways to break the game in half. And that's really all I have to say for Nuclear. I think that it was a bad attempt to, it was an interesting idea, but it was handled badly mechanically, because it's either going to be complete garbage because it won't be able to go first and it'll die, or it's going to be way too good because it's always going to go first and everything in front of it's going to fall because you're going to be hit for ×4. I will go into this in further detail when I discuss Nucleon itself, because Nucleon really is the big problem nuclear Pokemon, but I can't get a Nucleon yet, and I want to discuss Nucleon when I can get it. So look forward to that. Nuclear as a plot, though, is just as problematic. Now, I said that Nuclear was the worst thing in Uranium. That was an exaggeration. It's not the worst, but it is definitely a big problem with the game. So Nuclear as a plot, for its plot relevance, it's both the most important thing in the game while also being the least important. And that's mostly because of the way Uranium handles its storytelling. Nuclear Pokemon are introduced now, and they are considered this mysterious thing. You can learn a little bit about them before you reach Power Plant Epsilon, because one of the people that you can get as a contact will call you randomly, of course, and say, "Oh, I've heard of these things called nuclear Pokemon. They're kind of dangerous, so watch out." And again, that's a random phone call. I managed to get that phone call, though. It was just that it was on a scrapped recording, and I forgot to save that to show it. So that was a fault on my part. But I actually did get that phone call, and that's how I learned that someone warned you about that ahead of time. Because when I first played the game, I never got that phone call. So I thought this was the first time you learn about them. So what do they do for the plot? They are basically, Unstables at least, are basically rip-offs of Shadow Pokemon. I mentioned Shadow Pokemon for the ×2 aspect because of this mainly. What Unstable Nuclear Pokemon are essentially corrupted Pokemon, except instead of being corrupted by an evil team who were closing off their hearts, they were quote-unquote corrupted by radiation. Their bodies were altered by intense radiation, and now they are violent and they will not listen to humans. There is an exception to this. For the Unstables, at least, there's an exception to this, but that's a plot relevant thing, and that doesn't involve you, technically. That's really all they are. That's all Unstables are. They are violent, and unlike Shadow Pokemon, where you can purify them early, you can't do that for these. They also share the super affected against almost everything in the game thing as well, and that's really all they have in relation to Shadow Pokemon, because that's all most people do when they try to bring back Shadow Pokemon, is they just think about the violent part without thinking about how to purify them or think about how that can be integrated in the plot effectively. Or they just think Shadow Pokemon are cool because they're darker and they're more violent, and it's just they like the concept without kind of having good execution of said concept. And Uranium Pokemon, wow. Nuclear Pokemon definitely do not execute this very well. Primarily, again, because of the way they're integrated in the plot. They are our main antagonists. That's problem number one. They're the main antagonists. And I'm not lying. I made a joke in part 19 about running into Team Nuclear. There is no Team Nuclear. Technically there is. It's these nuclear Pokemon. That's Team Nuclear. A bunch of wild nuclear Pokemon, but You'll find out later they're not technically wild, but it's still like they are because you can catch them. You just can't really use them. But they are our main antagonists because everything that's going to go wrong in terms of important aspects of the plot are caused by these nuclear Pokemon. So they are the closest thing we have to an evil team, which I think is a problem because I thought if you're gonna kind of go with Shadow Pokemon, it would have been really neat to have had a group of people causing this and kind of changing these Pokemon and using them. And because then in that regard, it'd be a lot easier to get away with it. Because in Coliseum and Gale of Darkness, there were ways to like fix Shadow Pokemon that already existed that some people already knew of. But in Uranium, the way you fix them is through a method no one found out. So by theory, it would have been smarter if an evil team did this because it would have made more sense. It would have been like, hey, they won't be able to fix these Pokemon. But I digress. It also makes the sort of learning about sort of why people are doing this kind of moot because there's no one to talk to. There is a big antagonist that's in charge of this, but you won't be able to find out about them until later. And when you do, there's no real close learning about them. You don't really have meetings with them before to kind of talk to them and learn about their plans and why they're doing what they're doing, or at least learn about their personality, as you did with various teams, in Generation 3 onward. I mean, Team Rocket kind of wasn't like that either, but that was the first game, and, they were experimenting a lot. And I really sound like I'm tripping over my words here, but it's like, I don't have much to say, because plot-wise, it could really be shortened to this. Nuclear stuff, bad irradiation happens. Nuclear Pokemon caused it. Fight nuclear Pokemon. That's it. You can sometimes use your Pokemon speech translator, but all you get is like growls and kill humans. So again, that item doesn't even help. And even as like a threat, again, the first one I ran into was a freaking raccoon, which Tangoon's more threatening in terms than a Chinnimunk because, spoiler, I could have technically first ran into a nuclear Chinnimunk, which is even less threatening. But yeah, that's really all I have to say in the plot. They are not handled well. They are just really not. And it's mainly saved for the antagonist, who is handled to some extent worse. And that's kind of my problem with Uranium. It's always been my biggest problem with Uranium is it does not know how to pace its story. Neither does it even know how to tell its story when you're going through important story moments. It's very bad. That's why I had an issue with it, because like in the beginning of the game, you get the backstory that your mother disappeared after a nuclear meltdown, but it doesn't do anything with that after until you reach Bale Beach. And before then, it's just basic stuff you deal with a regular Pokemon game. So the need for the backstory felt just, all it was there was to foreshadow future events. But there was like nothing in between. It was just dealing with gyms and lots of trainers who spouted memes and or broke the fourth wall and or parodied, things that most people would make fun of when it comes to Pokemon. It was just, it really, nothing happened. And that's why, and I said that before, nothing happens. And it's a joke I say that nothing happens, but that is Uranium. Nothing happens. Even with their biggest plot point, nothing happens, really. That's why I hate them, because it's like, you could have done something, and they don't. They really don't. And that's really all I have to say plot-wise. It's like, I wanted to say a lot more, but I can't, because I either don't want to spoil, or there's nothing to talk about, other than they're imbalanced as a typing because of the whole stupid gimmick on they need high speed, because if they don't, they're going to die. And of course, the stupid issue of them not obeying you, and you won't be able to fix that till later. The only good thing I liked about them was really the song. And I also, I'm going to digress here, I also dislike the whole unstable aspect where they're all black and green. I think that's really lazy. There are occasional differences. Some may have different eyes. Alten's the biggest offender of how ugly this looks. changing their eyes. And there are some Pokemon that would smile that when they're nuclear, they have a frown now. Grr, so scary. It's not at all. So that's really it for nuclear Pokemon. I love the nuclear theme though. I think it does a good job in trying to portray them as threatening and portray them as this dangerous force. But the problem is because fighting a nuclear will always end in a just battle of you one shot them or they one shot you, which is kind of the flaw for a Pokemon in general, especially main game. That's what most fights will turn into. You just one shotting the trainers, but now nuclear gives them a chance to now have the AI do that to you, and it's very poorly handled. Mainly again for 2 points in the game. So not terrible, but the problem is those 2 points in the game are points of no return. Yeah, in a Pokemon game, a point of no return where if you lose, you'll kind of be in like a form of a lock. The first time it's more of a soft, it's not really a lock because you're not really at a dead end because you can still like grind, but the second time it is a very bad moment that if you can't win, you're fucked. I'll get into that later. So that's really it for nuclear Pokemon. I'm going to play the nuclear theme and hope you enjoy it. I know I do. This has been Fleur Majestrix, and have a good day.